There are 5 people in this video: a CIA biochemist, a plutonium plant worker, a nuclear technician, a bomb designer, and a weapons inspector. They worked for some of the most powerful institutions on Earth. They had clearances, salaries, families, normal lives inside extraordinary machines. And then every single one of them decided they couldn't stay quiet anymore. What happened next to each of them in order is what this video is about. Because the pattern is the same every time. First, they come for your career, then your reputation, then in some cases, they come for everything else.
My husband's death was not a deliberate or a willful act.
So let's go in order, starting with the mildest version of what this machine does to people and ending somewhere much, much darker. Frank Olsen was 43 years old, bacteriologist, father of 3. He worked at Fort Detrick, Maryland, the US Army's top secret biological weapons facility. He'd been there for a decade. He was trusted enough that by 1953, he was acting chief of the Special Operations Division, which sounds like a boring Army admin role, and was actually a CIA research station hidden behind and inside a military base. He knew everything. The experimental interrogation programs, the biological weapons they were developing, the human subjects they were testing on. He traveled to Germany that summer and watched CIA safe house interrogations firsthand. Sessions where, in his son Eric's later description, people were literally interrogated to death. He came home quiet, distant at dinner. His wife could tell something had broken in him. He told her he wanted to quit, and here is where it starts, because in these words, "I want to quit," is not a resignation letter. It's a security problem. On November 19th, 1953, Olsen was at a mandatory work retreat with CIA and Army colleagues at a cabin on Deep Creek Lake in western Maryland. After dinner, 2 bottles of Cointreau appeared at the table, both open, both identical. Robert Lashbrook, deputy to CIA chemist Sidney Gottlieb, the man running MK Ultra, poured drinks from one bottle and served them around the group. He and Gottlieb drank from the other. 20 minutes later, Frank Olsen realized something was wrong. His drink was spiked with LSD. Gottlieb's wasn't. The official explanation given years later was that this was an experiment to see if scientists would give up secrets if unexpectedly drugged. The real explanation, based on every document that since came out, is a lot simpler. They were testing whether Olsen, who had been flagging as a security risk, would stay stable under pressure. Conducted by slipping a man hallucinogens without his knowledge. He failed the test, not because he said anything classified, because the drug devastated him. He came home to his family in Frederick, Maryland, sat down at the dinner table, refused to eat, and said to his wife, "I have made a terrible mistake." Over the next 9 days, the CIA managed him, took him to New York to see a psychiatrist, except the psychiatrist, Harold Abramson, wasn't an independent doctor. He was an LSD researcher on the CIA's payroll. Olsen told him he wanted to resign. He was reportedly told he couldn't, he knew too much. On November 28, 1953, at 2:25 in the morning, Lashbrook woke in their shared hotel room to a loud crash. The window was broken. Olsen was gone, 13 floors down on the sidewalk of a Manhattan street. The first thing Lashbrook did was not call the police. The hotel operator manually recorded the call he made instead. He said, "He's gone." The person on the other end replied, "Well, that's too bad," and hung up. Olsen's sealed coffin was delivered to his wife 2 days later. She was told not to open it. Facial injuries. She received a government pension. That was all the family knew for 22 years. In 1975, buried in a government report investigating CIA abuses, there was a 2-paragraph footnote about an Army scientist who had died falling from a hotel window after being given LSD. Well, the family pieced it all together. Within 10 days, President Gerald Ford personally apologized to them in the Oval Office. They accepted $750,000 and signed away the right to sue. But the sons, Eric and Nils, never accepted the story. In 1994, they had the body exhumed. A forensic pathologist found a hematoma on the skull above the left eye, consistent with a blunt force blow to the head before the fall, not consistent with jumping through a window. The New York District Attorney changed the official cause of death from suicide to unknown. It has never been changed back. Sidney Gottlieb, the man who ordered the drugging, the man who destroyed all the MKUltra records in 1973 when he heard congressional investigators were coming, retired on a CIA pension. He moved to a farm in rural Virginia. He died in 1999. He was never charged with anything. Olsen's son Eric is now in his 70s. He still lives in the same house in Frederick, Maryland, where his father came home that November night and refused to eat dinner. He has spent his entire adult life trying to find out what actually happened, and he has not found out. That's what they do when you're a liability. Now watch what they do when you're actively dangerous. Karen Silkwood was 28. She wasn't a scientist. She was a lab technician at the Kerr-McGee plutonium plant near Crescent, Oklahoma, making fuel rods for nuclear reactors. She joined the union. She was elected to the bargaining committee, and she started noticing things. Workers were being contaminated with plutonium constantly, and nobody was telling them what that meant because Kerr-McGee had never bothered to inform its employees that microscopic amounts of inhaled plutonium caused cancer. The fuel rod quality control reports were being falsified, meaning defective nuclear fuel rods could end up in reactors. And roughly 40 pounds of plutonium was unaccounted for, enough for approximately 2 nuclear bombs. She told her union. They told her to gather evidence quietly. So she said she'd do it. And she went back to the plant. 8 days before she died, she triggered a radiation alarm. Tests showed she was contaminated, not from the fuel pellets she was handling, but from the inside of her gloves, meaning the contamination didn't come from her work. It was placed there. Over the following 3 days, plutonium turned up throughout her apartment, the bathroom, the refrigerator, inside the food she was about to eat. A health physics team traced the specific plutonium isotope to a production batch she had never worked on, stored in a vault she had no access to. Somebody brought it to her home. She was convinced she was going to die of plutonium poisoning. She kept working anyway. And on the evening of November 13th, 1974, Silkwood left a union meeting clutching a manila folder full of documents she had gathered. She got into her white Honda Civic on State Highway 74, heading to meet the New York Times journalist who had broken the Frank Serpico corruption story. She never arrived. Her car left the road and hit a concrete culvert, and she died on impact. Police ruled it an accident. She'd taken Quaaludes, probably fell asleep at the wheel. Case closed. The documents were not found at the scene. Not in the wreck, not on the road, not anywhere. They were gone. An independent investigator hired by her union found paint chips on her rear bumper that didn't match her car, and dent patterns consistent with being struck from behind. In 1992, 18 years later, a state trooper told an attorney that 4 local police officers had been working off-duty for Kerr-McGee and had been following Silkwood on the road that night. No charges were ever filed. The company settled for $1.38 million. They admitted nothing. The plant closed in 1979. Meryl Streep played Karen in the 1983 film. The documents were still never found. Up to this point, one suspicious death. The machine applies pressure and people end up at the bottom of hotel windows or in roadside culverts. But there's a third option, one that's arguably more disturbing, where the machine doesn't kill you, it just takes your entire life instead. Mordechai Vanunu was a nuclear technician at Israel's Dimona facility in the Negev desert for 9 years. He worked in the deep underground section, the part where the actual weapons were built. He knew exactly what was there. Israel had maintained for decades what it calls nuclear opacity, officially neither confirming nor denying a nuclear arsenal. Vanunu knew that what was underground at Dimona would end that policy permanently. A minimum 100 nuclear warheads, making Israel the 6th largest nuclear power on Earth. all of it hidden from the international community, all of it denied. He took 57 photographs on 2 rolls of film before he quit. Then he took them to the Sunday Times in London. Israel intelligence found out the story was coming. The decision was made to get him out of Britain because the Israeli government had promised Prime Minister Thatcher no operations on British soil, so they needed him somewhere else. They ran a psychological profile on Vanunu. The conclusion? Lonely, socially isolated, susceptible to female attention. So they deployed an agent named Cheryl Bentov, alias Cindy, posing as an American tourist from Florida. Here's the detail you need to hold on to. Vanunu spoke to her first. He saw her near a shop window in Leicester Square. He walked up and asked if she was a tourist. He asked her for coffee. His own journalist contact warned him directly she might be Mossad. He went to Rome with her anyway. In the apartment she led him to, 3 agents were waiting. They grabbed him, injected him with a sedative, and drove him to a coastal beach, transferred him to a speedboat, and put him on an Israeli naval ship disguised as a merchant vessel. 7 days at sea to Israel. On his way to his first court appearance, he wrote on his palm and pressed it against the van window for journalists outside. Vanunu M was hijacked in Rome, ITL 3986-2100, came to Rome to fly BA 504. Police covered his mouth and pulled his hand down. Trial was done entirely in secret. Sentence, 18 years. More than 11 of those years were spent in solitary confinement in a cell 6 feet wide by 9 feet long. The prison placed a cardboard cutout of a human figure outside his cell window so that when he looked out, he would see something shaped like a person. The Sunday Times published the story anyway. The world found out about Israel's arsenal. It didn't matter, he was already inside. He was released in 2004. A crowd outside the prison chanted "Death to traitors." His parents had disowned him. The Israeli government imposed permanent restrictions, no contact with foreigners, no leaving the country, advance notice required for all movements. Norway offered him residency with his wife. Israel refused to let him go. As of his 70th birthday last year, he had been posting the same message online every single month. 1 more year without freedom since 1986. Cindy, Cheryl Bentov, lives in Florida. She has refused every interview. Her one comment, reported in the Israeli press, "For me, this is a black story and I just want to erase it and forget it." Now the man who didn't just know about the weapons, he built them. Andrei Sakharov was the father of the Soviet hydrogen bomb. By 1953, he was the most decorated scientist in the USSR. 3 Hero of Socialist Labor medals. Thank you, Kat. Full member of the Academy of Scientists at age 32. The state protected him. The KGB watched him to keep him safe. In November 1955, after the first successful test of a true Soviet hydrogen bomb, a weapon he'd designed, the scientists, generals, and party officials sat down to a celebration dinner. Brandy was poured. Sakharov was asked to give the first toast. He stood up and said, "May all our devices explode as successfully as today's, but always over test sites and never over cities." The military commander responded with a crude joke, and the message was clear. Scientists build weapons. The party decides what to do with them. Know your role. Sakharov later wrote that this was the moment his life permanently changed. Understanding something in an abstract way, he wrote, is different from feeling it with your whole being, like the reality of life and death. The ideas and emotions kindled at this moment have not diminished to this day, and they completely altered my thinking. He had already done the calculation. Every megaton of atmospheric nuclear testing produces roughly 10,000 cancer deaths worldwide, scattered across decades, in places that will never be connected to the explosion. He tried to stop further tests. He wrote directly to Khrushchev. He was told to stay in his lane. The tests went ahead. In 1968, he published an essay calling for democratic reform, an end to the arms race, and international cooperation. It was smuggled out and published in the New York Times. Overnight, his security clearance was revoked. He was stripped of all classified work. The most valuable scientist in the Soviet Union became, in a single afternoon, a problem to be managed. In January 1980, after he publicly condemned the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, they put him on a special flight to Gorky, a city closed to all foreigners, 250 miles from Moscow. No journalists, no colleagues, no way to communicate except through channels the KGB controlled. They searched his apartment repeatedly. They stole his memoirs 3 times. 3 times he rewrote them from memory, more than 1,000 pages rebuilt from scratch, in a city he couldn't leave. His wife wrote to the West. He is miserable without the opportunity to phone some colleagues and discuss an integral equation when the thought occurs. Andrei so lacks the atmosphere of science that he even talks to me about physics, and it would be difficult to find a less qualified audience. In 1985, to force the government to allow his wife to travel abroad for heart surgery, he went on a hunger strike. They force-fed him in a hospital. He kept going, and they gave in. She went. She came back 6 months later. Gorbachev called and told them they could come home. Sakharov died of a heart attack in December 1989, 2 years before the Soviet Union he'd spent a decade fighting finally dissolved. He almost made it. And then there's David Kelly, the weapons inspector who knew the dossier was wrong. The man who told a British diplomat in Geneva in what was described at the time as a throwaway remark, "I will probably be found dead in the woods," and was found dead in the woods 5 months later. The official verdict is suicide. That is the recorded conclusion of the government inquiry. What is also on the record, the normal coroner's inquest, legally required for suspicious deaths in the UK, was replaced within hours of the body being found by a government-appointed inquiry led by a judge personally selected by Tony Blair's administration. That inquiry sealed all medical records for 70 years. 9 forensic pathologists later wrote publicly that the stated cause of death was a medical implausibility. A retired pathologist told the inquiry they would probably have been an open verdict had a normal coroner examined it. The Attorney General ruled in 2011 there would be no new inquest. The Chilcot report, published in 2016, 13 years after Kelly died, confirmed that the intelligence dossier had been exaggerated, that the 45-minute claim was weak intelligence, inadequately sourced and oversold to Parliament, that Kelly had been right about all of it. He was right. He said so. He died in the woods. The file opens in 2073. 5 people, 1 pattern. The CIA biochemist who wanted to quit got drugged and fell from a window. The nuclear plant worker who was gathering evidence got her food contaminated and died on a dark road with the documents mysteriously missing. The technician who photographed the weapons was lured to Rome and spent 11 years in a cell with a cardboard human for company. The bomb's own designer got stripped of everything and rewrote his memoirs 3 times from a closed city. The weapons inspector who knew the war was built on lies was found dead in the woods. The machine doesn't panic. It doesn't make mistakes it can't cover. It just calculates what each person is worth versus what they cost, and then it responds accordingly. The only variable, the only thing that changed across all 5 stories, is what each of them decided to do when they realized what they were part of. Subscribe, because this channel only exists for exactly this.